Hey guys, welcome back. So in the last video I talked about the basics of UV Master, getting quick UVs on your model in the click of a button. Super useful tool. And in this video I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive and go over the rest of these settings, the control painting, and also working on the UVs with, once it's flattened, you can manipulate them that way. So right now, if you haven't seen the last video, I have some UVs on here already, and I used UV Master with symmetry and polygroups turned on, and these polygroups are set up from UVs that I did within Maya and brought them in and then used polygroups by UVs. So that gave me a little bit of a head start, because when I flatten this out, these UVs are roughly based on the UVs that I did within Maya, because they were split up by polygroups. They're not exactly the same, but it gave me a bit of a head start. So what I'm going to do first, we're just going to assume that I built this model totally within ZBrush and retopoed it within ZBrush, and see if we can get a little, what type of effect we can get just using UV Master with no polygroups. So let's turn... We'll go to auto groups. So this is just one single group. You can also hit Control W and it'll give you auto groups. And now we're going to go up. Let's see what it gives us just with unwrap and symmetry. Let's say check seams, turn polyframe off. So it gave us a very similar result. If you saw the last video, gave us a very similar result. I'm pretty sure exactly the same result if I flatten this out. So I've got two tiles, and it looks like it's separated the top of the head, and then left the lower part of the head and the body in a single piece. And these toes are pretty messy. And the legs are pretty messy too. The hands actually look, well, the tips of the fingers looks like there's a few issues. But overall, I mean, it does a decent job. And, you know, if I were to reproject the textures onto this, it would give me a decent result. So let's unflatten that. And I will turn check seams off. So what I talked about in the last video, if I wanted to, I could go through and manually, you know, paint out. You know, let me turn polygroups on. I could paint out certain sections that I wanted. And it would take a while. I could paint on my polygroups, so Alt or Control W. But then I missed a couple tiles here. Say if I wanted my forearm separated. So Control W. And then I would turn on polygroups, and then unwrap it again, and then this forearm would separate out. So I could go through and do that with the whole body. Check seams, flatten. But I'd rather not do that. So let's Control W, give them a new poly group. So let's talk about enable control painting. So this is a tool to roughly control where the seams are going to be. So protect is areas of the model where you want no seams to be visible. So usually, let me turn polyframe off. This comes out red and helps usually to turn symmetry on, hit by hitting X. So usually, let's say I want the face, the front of the torso, to have no seams. So let's try unwrapping it that way. Then check the seams. And that actually gave us a much cleaner result. Let me go back, or let me flatten this first, just so you can see. So it left the face intact. It got some weird scrunching around the mouth area, which probably needs to be fixed. let's protect the top of the feet too. Let's see what kind of result that gives us. Let me turn back face masking on, because I still want it to be able to get through those toes. Let's see what that does. Unwrap. Didn't make much of a difference. I think it's always going to have trouble recognizing these toes. But I am happy that we got this clean seam along the fingers. If I flatten this guy out, you can see these fingers are not perfect, but they're in much better shape than they were, and the face is looking a lot better. So there's not just protect, we can then also influence it with attract. So let's say I want the UV seams to go down the front of the arm. So I'm going to paint this blue. So this is telling ZBrush that when it does the seams, that it wants to protect the red area and attract the blue area. So I'm assuming maybe a seam will come down here and then maybe cut along here and then go along the arms. And let's check the outside of the leg this time instead of the inside. Let's see how well this works. So unwrap. Wow, and just like I painted it. So yeah, the seam came down from the back of the head, came along here, and if I go back to my control painting, you can see, you turn that off, you can see how it followed where I painted it red and blue. All right. Let's go over one more thing, and that is attract from ambient occlusion. So this is kind of an automatic way to hide your seams where they're going to be less visible when you're displaying the model. So ambient occlusion is where darkness would naturally gather in crevices or creases, and it's smart to include this type of button because that's the exact same mentality of where you would want to hide UV seams. So when I click attract from ambient occlusion, it's going to be underneath the model along the hands. Now this isn't always going to be a perfect result because you might want the palms to not have any seams, and you might want to hide this like I usually do along the back of the arm, which is usually less visible. But for something like the legs, yeah, you want that seam to be on the inside of the legs. And also separate out this, the eye and mouth cavities, maybe even separate out the nasal cavity. I don't know if it'll do that. But then under here, autosave, then under here, it's going to maybe try separating out the face from the neck underneath the chin. So we don't know. And then behind the ear, we don't necessarily want the ear separated out. So let's hit unwrap and see what kind of seams the ambient occlusion gave us. Check seams. Well, it definitely worked along the underside of the leg and the underside of the arms and the interior of the legs. But it also gave us seams right along the face. Didn't really follow from underneath the chin, and it didn't do anything with the ears. And I don't know if it separated out the mouth cavity, but let's flatten this out and see what it looks like. Very strange. So, like I said in the previous video, if you're just doing a one-off model and you're not going to be reusing it over and over again, and The geometry is pretty simple, and the UVs don't need to be perfect. UV Master is a great tool to just get it done very quickly, because then it's just done in the program. You copy those UVs over to your main model, and it's done. For something that's going to be reused over and over again, where you want to have like flawless UVs, or close to flawless UVs, you really want to go in and do it by hand and make those seams exactly where you want them to be. One more thing that I should mention is the ability to work on your model while it's flattened out. So if I just take my move brush, and actually let me turn off symmetry because this isn't symmetrical on the grid, but I can manipulate this, the UVs in flat space if I want to. And this is also useful because I think I can paint on them as well. Let me turn off polyframe, turn RGB on. Oops, let me turn on Z-add. Yeah. So if you wanted to open up your lightbox or something and project detail, or project a texture onto your flattened mesh, this is your chance to do that. Although this is so low res that it's probably not worth it. All right, let me unflatten that. And that's pretty much all of the tools within here. The density, this density button, I don't ever really use, but if you are concerned with the texture density of your UVs, this is a way to control that with this density slider. And these last two buttons down here, load control map and save control map, are a way to store and save these control paintings up here. So, well, this is the Ambient Occlusion one, but the one that I had before with the red and blue, if that took you a long time to paint and you wanted to save it for later, you could reload that and then mess with it later. All right, so that's going to cover it for the deep dive on UV Master and ZBrush. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you were confused or didn't know how to use these extra tools within UV Master, the plugin. If you have any questions about anything I went over, leave me a comment below. I'll try to get to all of those. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching, guys.